This topic that we're going to review is about connecting algebra equations to the concepts of geometry. So at the top of your worksheet, the first thing that I want you to notice is that there are certain vocabulary words that at this point we expect you to know. There's also certain symbolism that could be used in problems that we would expect you to know. And lastly, there's certain markings that might appear in pictures that we would expect you to know. So before you go on to the actual examples, I'm going to recommend that you pause the video and make sure you understand every one of these things. If there's anything that you don't understand, you probably ought to ask your tutor for help before you proceed on. Once you've gone through and reviewed the entire list, then you're ready to go on to the next example. All right, on this first example, we would like you to take notes from this video onto your paper so that you have them to refer to. As I read this problem, there's different things that they're telling us, and I will highlight as I go. The first thing they tell me is that A is the midpoint of segment XY. So if I wanted a visual of what's going on here, I know I have a segment whose endpoints are XY, which it tells me that here. And if it tells me A is the midpoint, not only should I put A about in the middle of that picture, I put these little marks to remind myself that that is the midpoint. The next thing that this problem tells me is that XA is equal to 3x. Now, since XA doesn't have a symbol on top, that's telling me that the distance or the length is 3x. It also tells me here that YA is 5x minus 6. In every one of these problems, I need to think to myself, what is the relationship between the things that I know? The things that I know right now are segments, and these two segments are the same length, and the reason that I know they're the same length is because when I built this, I made this mark to remind myself that those are the same length. So the equation that I'm going to set up is 3x is equal to 5x minus 6. The rest of this problem basically asks me to find out what xy is, and it tells me to write and solve an equation to answer the question. Once I start to solve this, I basically see that I've got my constant negative 6 already together, so I'm going to subtract 5x from both sides. This cancels out to leave me negative 6, and on this side I get a negative 2x. Then I'm going to divide by negative 2, so x is equal to 3. Let's make sure I answered the question. The question wanted to know what is xy. Well, if I look back, since I know that x is 3 now, if I stick 3 back into this problem, 3 times 3 makes this part 9. 5 times 3 minus 6 makes this part 15 minus 6 also 9. So xy is 18. So the answer to my question is xy is equal to 18. Pause the video if you need time to write this down. Question number 2 says, when I read this, given that the measure of angle ADC is 135, now before I go on, let me mark that in my picture. Angle ADC is this angle. They're saying that entire angle is 135 degrees. They're asking me, oh, on the wrong thing, one more time. They're asking me to find the measure of BDC, and then of course they go on to say write and solve an equation. So right now I know 7x is this much of the angle. 11x plus 9 is this much of the angle. And if the entire angle is equal to 135, then I can add 7x plus 11x plus 9 is equal to 135. So we're basically saying that this angle that I shaded in green plus the angle that I shaded in red is equal to the 135 degrees. So when I add these together, I'm actually solving the equation now. I get 18x plus 9 is equal to 135. I subtract the 9 off of both sides, which leaves me 18x is equal to 126. I divide both sides by 18. Can't do that one in my head. That's 7. Let's make sure that I did what I was supposed to. I was supposed to find out what is the measure of angle BDC. Well, BDC in my picture is this red angle that's represented by 11x plus 9. So I'm going to take the 7 and stick it in here. So I'll have 77 plus 9, which makes 86 the measure of angle BDC. And that is my final answer. So we have one more left to go, example number 3. In example 3, I'm going to read along. It tells me LMN and PQR are complementary angles. I have to know what complementary means. Complementary angles are angles that add up to 90 degrees. Angles that add up to 90. So one way to think of that is that I'm going to have one angle plus another angle is equal to 90 degrees. And the two angles that I know from what I just read is angle LMN and angle PQR. Now they tell us in the next part of this, as I'm reading on, that the measure of LMN is 4x minus 2. So that's what's going to go here. I'll read on further. They tell me PQR is 9x plus 1. So this is 9x plus 1. The question is, what is the measure of each angle? Well, I have this nice equation. I can combine my like terms, so I basically have 13x minus 1 equals 90. I add 1 to both sides, and I get 13x is equal to 91. I divide by 13, and x is, I have a feeling this is going to be 7 again. X is equal to 7. I'm not finished till I answer my question. The question was, what is the measure of each angle? Well, remember, we decided that the measure of angle LMN was 4x minus 2. So if I take my 4x minus 2 and I stick a 7 in there, I get 28 minus 2, which is 26. And this is the measure of LMN. Change colors here. This was angle PQR, 9x plus 1. So if I stick 7 in, because that's what I found out x was, 9 times 7 is 63, plus 1 is 64, and that's the measure of angle PQR. So hopefully you've got that all down in your notes, and you're ready to try some on your own with the practice worksheet.